Mango leaves rattled quietly in the late afternoon breeze, as if whispering old secrets. The small cemetery in St. Anne's Bay, Jamaica, sat perched on a gentle slope overlooking the turquoise Caribbean Sea. It was here that Esroy Campbell, a man with secrets neatly tucked behind his august personality and polished shoes, prepared to bury his wife Patsy. Family and friends had gathered under the blazing sun dressed in their somber best, waiting to witness the final farewell. But the funeral of a hard-working Jamaican woman who had gone to America and made something from nothing would be anything but ordinary today. You see, Ezroy arrived at his wife's funeral with another woman by his side. She stood close to him, wearing a simple white dress, holding a bouquet in her manicured hands. The hush of shock swept through the small crowd like a sudden gust of wind. Patsy's children, Giselle and Marcus, exchanged stunned glances. Cousins, aunties, and old friends from both sides of the family looked shocked and confused. Who was this woman? And who brings another woman, wearing a white dress at that, looking like she's at her wedding, to his wife's funeral? His kids and the few relatives who weren't rendered immobile from shock tried to approach Ezra, but they were thwarted by his apparent security detail. Ezra's mother, siblings, and cousins whispered among themselves, already aware of the woman in white, Mavis, and very comfortable with their presence. They saw Mavis not as a mistress, but as the woman Ezra truly loved. They had known for years that Ezra belonged to two worlds, the one he built with Patsy in the Bronx, and the one he nurtured back in his homeland with Mavis. They might not have initially approved of the deception, but they accepted it, and ultimately became complicit in its execution. After all, Ezra was a man, and in their eyes, he was simply following his heart. In their tidy home in the Bronx, Patsy managed everything: the bills, the children's schooling, the Sunday dinners after church, and even Ezra's life. He was physically there, he lived in the house, he slept in their bed, but he was emotionally absent. He paid half the mortgage, but never pitched in for utilities or groceries, and never contributed to the kids' extracurricular activities, and definitely never maintained anything around the house or helped to decorate for the holidays. He always had an excuse. I'm tired. I forgot to check Delroy. I can't this month, baby. I have to help my family in Jamaica. JFK and LaGuardia knew him well because he was always leaving to check on some distant cousin's health or sort out a family emergency. Things that uncannily happen in coincidence with birthdays, anniversaries, and school recitals. What the children, Giselle and Marcus, didn't know at first was that their father had them have a set of children with a woman named Mavis back in Jamaica. Two kids, Angela and Mario, born just weeks apart from Giselle and Marcus. While Ezra would occasionally bestow a dry happy birthday upon Giselle and Marcus, he would throw lavish parties in Jamaica for Angela and Mario, full of balloons, new games, catered food, anything they wanted, they got. He ensured that they attended the best private schools, had piano lessons and swimming classes, and hardly ever wore the same outfit twice. With Mavis, he laughed more, he showed affection and tenderness. He ensured Mavis and their children wanted for nothing. In America, Patsy struggled. She stretched her teaching assistant's salary to cover groceries, utility bills, and everything she and her children needed. After years of scrimping and saving, and with the money she inherited from her grandfather, she built a nice home in her family's community in Jamaica, a modest green and white concrete house on a hill. She thought it would be a legacy for her children, but Ezra never supported it. Instead, he mocked her for putting money into some Jamaican property that don't even matter because you hardly go Jamaica. Poor Patsy didn't know that he had designs on that very house he was hating on. The pastor began the graveside service under the hot sun. Giselle's eyes were wet with confusion and hurt. Her mother's coffin lay before them, tasteful and elegant, just like her mom. Unbeknownst to Esroy, while going through their mother's paperwork and getting her affairs in order after her passing, the children had uncovered improprieties with her accounts in Jamaica, suspicious transactions, and strange calls on the phone bills from their father's phone number. A pattern had emerged. While their father complained about financial hardship in America, he was pumping cash into a life in Jamaica. That Jamaican house their mother had built, by renting out rooms in the Bronx, scrimping on clothes, and going without vacations, had magically ended up in some woman named Mavis's name. Upon further investigation, it emerged that a corrupt banker friend of Ezroy's arranged a bogus title transfer immediately after Patsy's death. The bank accounts Patsy had painstakingly grown were also transferred into Mavis's name before the children could get to Jamaica to access them. And upon their arrival in Jamaica, every attempt was made by the bank to thwart their access to information. Luckily, Marcus was able to get to the bank's U.S. fraud department, and they initiated an investigation unbeknownst to the Jamaican branch's local staff. Marcus clenched his fist as he remembered how every summer his father would vanish like clockwork to deal with family emergencies in Jamaica. Marcus and Giselle had always wondered how these emergencies never required their mother's presence, nor were they welcome to come along, despite it being summertime. No, it all made sense. Their father had lived a double life for decades. As the funeral proceeded, relatives dabbed their eyes with kerchiefs. Patsy's siblings glared daggers at Esroy. He pretended not to notice, squeezing Mavis's hand as if to reassure her. He had decided that after the funeral, he was going to propose to Mavis. He wanted to cement their future in front of everyone. And, as a token of his intentions, as soon as his kids left, Mavis and her kids were moving into the house that Patsy had built. The same house that he had done everything to sabotage. In his twisted mind, these things were to prove his love and legitimize their union. His American children, hurt, betrayed, and broke, would have to understand that he'd chosen his path. He had to choose his happiness. And if they wanted to cut him off, he didn't care, because he still had his Jamaican family that adored him and that he could now file the paperwork to bring to America for. Once Patsy's coffin was lowered into the ground, the crowd rapidly dispersed to Patsy's family home for the repast. Platters of curry goat, rice, soup, fried chicken, fried dumpling, jerk chicken, fish, and all kinds of liquor were piled high in the backyard. Everyone was discussing Ezra's audacity and lamenting the fact that even in death, Patsy was a decent woman, and that nowadays Duppy's don't box people, or else it would have definitely been a double funeral when Patsy Duppy done lean up Ezra's jawbone. Some guests sipped their drinks or managed water and looked at Ezra with shame, others with contempt, while Mavis, bereft of shame or tact, mingled with Ezra's family, smiling demurely, reveling in the reactions to her grand coronation. She felt vindicated. After all these years of waiting in the shadows, she had arrived at her rightful place by Ezra's side. Wifey had walked out, well, she did drop out, and she was standing up. Giselle and Marcus stood apart with their cousins. Marcus turned to his sister, his voice low but furious. He brought her here to my mother's funeral? Giselle nodded, tears brimming again. And look at all of them, as if this is normal, she said. I can't understand it. Let's leave. But Marcus shook his head. No, we're not going anywhere. Watch how this is going to play out. He thinks he took everything Mom built and gave it to her. I want to see his face when he realizes that we are going to have the last laugh. They had managed to thwart the completion of the property transfer, and the funds were pending return to Patsy's accounts, thanks to the intervention of the bank's U.S. Home Office and the diligence of the head of security for the Jamaican branch. Ezra and Mavis thought they were going to be nice once Ezra received his share of the payout from Patsy's life insurance policies. Funny enough, he'd refused to have any policies underwritten for him, claiming Patsy just wanted to benefit from his death, and he didn't want anybody getting any insurance on him and then killing him off. And in his arrogance, Hannah realized that he was never a beneficiary on any of Patsy's policies. He was so absent that he didn't even know where her policies were, and he bought the story the kids gave him that they would receive the payouts after the funeral once her will was adjudicated. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through the leafy canopy, casting dancing shadows across the dirt driveway outside Patsy's family home. Amid the subdued hum, Mavis slipped away from the crowd and climbed into the front seat of a parked car down the road. She carefully shut the door, a mischievous grin tugging at her lips as she took out her cell phone and dialed. Her voice dropped low as she spoke. She leaned against the steering wheel and watched the distant figures moving up and down the street. She thought herself completely alone, safe in the cocoon of tinted glass. Esroy had seen Mavis covertly leaving and decided to go after her in case her courage was faltering. As he passed the row of parked cars, a gentle breeze carried a snippet of Mavis's voice, muffled but urgent. Curious and slightly puzzled, Ezra crept toward the sedan. He could see Mavis's silhouette through the windshield and, tilting his head, made out the low murmur of her voice. The tone was unlike anything he'd heard from her before, cunning, calculating, and every word soaked in deceit. He pressed himself alongside the side of the vehicle, heart pounding, as he strained to catch her every word. "Him so married, me no worry yourself. This fool think him really have it locked. Was the papers come true? I'm asking them can't happen, not true. Then me can't steal the American and collect him social security either way. Because I don't him gonna make the good money. Patsy was really the breadwinner, so him don't really have nothing to forgive me. The life insurance money soon drop. And now that me get the house and the bank accounts, it's set. Yes, man, it's set good. Fool think I see him picking them immersions all along. Him all sign birth certificate and never miss a first day of school or birthday party, so I can show a strong relationship if the embassy need that. But even if them other DNA, me no business, but don't get what me forget. Me and you and the kids them know say, you are them father." Esroy froze. Him stomach twitched up. He leaned closer to confirm that he wasn't hearing things. Mavis continued, "One big idiot, man, you know. I didn't even have to make up my face too much. When me tell the fool, say, if him got a funeral without me, that means say him not love me and him still a hide me. All these years, him think me love him. I him money me love." Ezra stumbled backwards. His heart hammered in his chest. Mavis, his children, his Jamaican children were not his? She cunning? She used them? She had played him just as he had played Patsy. The magnitude of this betrayal, and now his predicament, came crashing down on him like a liquor-zing hot in a hurricane. The repast continued, with Patsy's family determined to not let Ezra's impudence or Mavis's audacity derail the day. There was a silent consensus to not let the day become all about them. A few elders had started singing him softly when Ezra burst into the yard, sweat rolling down his face, his eyes wild. He was wondering, what me I gonna do? As he stood in the yard and looked around, his American children were staring daggers at him, and Mavis's children didn't even notice that he returned. They were socializing with his family nearby. Everything came into frightening focus. He had no home to return to in the Bronx. Patsy's children would never speak to him again. He had no assets now, not even a portion of Patsy's accounts. He had irrevocably tied himself to a woman who had given him 2 jackets and planned to have him have an accident after getting her green card. The future he'd imagined: getting Mavis and their children U.S. citizenship, retiring, living happily ever after with Mavis at his side, would never be. Marcus, unable to restrain himself, stepped towards him, with his cousins trying to hold him back. "So, Dad, you were living a double life all along?" The bitterness in his voice was palpable. Giselle stood beside him, arms folded. "We know what you did. We know about the money in the house, Dad. That was Mom's inheritance. How could you?" Relatives turned to listen. The air grew heavy. Esroy stammered, his usual arrogance gone. I'm sorry, kids." But even that apology stuck in his throat. Sorry wouldn't bring back the years he denied them his presence or his financial support. Sorry wouldn't restore Patsy's pain, his abandonment. Sorry wouldn't make Mavis love him truly or reverse the theft he had orchestrated. Behind him, Mavis picked up a piece of sweet potato pudding and took a delicate bite, eyeing Ezra over the rim of her plate. She said nothing. She didn't need to. She had the house, she had the money, and soon enough, she would have unfettered access to Ezra's share of Patsy's life insurance with a green card back of that. Her smugness was erased when Marcus told his father that the property transfer was not finalized and that they had recovered the accounts and that he was never a life insurance beneficiary. She crowed, "What? Esroy? What? So you don't have no money? The house is not mine? How could you embarrass me like this?" Ezra realized that everyone was watching them, and Mavis, who had grabbed her children and stormed out of the yard, became the least of his concerns. His American children would return to the States with nothing but anger and disdain for him. Patsy's siblings, who had always wondered at her choice of husband, now had their worst suspicions confirmed. And his family, who once looked to him with pride, were suddenly uneasy. They had facilitated and were complicit in his double life, believing that he loved Mavis, and now there would be no grand payday for them either. Did they know Mavis's true intentions and that her children weren't his? All kind of things were floating around in his brain. He felt like a foolish, deceitful man who had betrayed his good wife for a mirage. Marcus and Giselle turned on their heels and left, refusing to break down in front of all these people. They would return to America and make their own way in the world. They had already lost their mother. Their father, in truth, they never really had. In the quiet stillness, as guests packed up to-go plates and left, leaving only the scent of curry goat and sorrow in the air, Esroy understood his fate. Patsy was gone forever, and with her, any chance of forgiveness or redemption. His children would not invite him back into their lives. Mavis. He was stranded, broke, and utterly alone in a country he once called home. He'd reduced himself to an unfunny sideshow on a day that should have been about love, reverence, and the celebration of the life of a woman who did everything to be the love of his life. The humming of distant traffic, the rustling of mango leaves, and the soft lapping of the sea at the rocky shore in the distance offered him no comfort. Here he stood, a man who had gambled love and loyalty across 2 countries, 2 families, and lost it all.